My name is Anita. I'm 44 years old, and I survived child abuse and a alcoholic parent. My childhood, in 3 words, would be painful, long, and dark. I grew up in a very religious household. I was an only child until I was 7. My mom had 3 miscarriages, and then she had my brother. We lived in Michigan in a log cabin in the woods, so there really was no one around. And then when my brother was born, that was the boy that they were wanting. And that's when I was locked in the basement on Saturdays until all the laundry was done for the whole family for the whole week. My mom, I think she went through some sort of midlife crisis, or I'm not really sure what triggered it, but she started going out and drinking. She went from this woman who would make us matching Easter dresses, and being so religious, to going out and drinking. It started happening more and more. She did not divorce my father until I was about 21. So she was still married the whole time she was doing this. Then she started bringing me along. She would be dating bouncers to try to get me in the door, and that's how they got me in. She would be dating the bouncers, and her friends would like to watch me get drunk and dance around. And I was, 16 at the time. It wasn't great. Obviously, my oldest son is 25 now, and I couldn't imagine doing that. Yeah, I could not imagine doing that with him. I just couldn't. Then things progressed where that wasn't exciting enough for her. She had one of those Dodge minivans. She took the seats out of the back. She put blankets down in the back. She got a CB. She started picking up truckers and having sex with them in the back of her van. At that point, we kind of flipped, and I became the parent, and she became the child. It got to the point where she would be gang raped. She would call me crying from different locations because the truckers would pick her up and just take her. And so I, a 16, 17-year-old girl, tiny. I'm not tiny now, but I was little. And I would have to get out of my little tiny Geo Metro and point at her and say, "You get in the car." And then I would point to these giant truckers and say, "You don't ever call her, don't ever touch her, don't ever anything again." And I'd have to establish dominance over these huge men at that point in my life. And that's kind of stuck with me my whole life. I've always been very, very feisty, headstrong, all of it. And that's where it came from. The reason I don't talk about my dad is because I think that if they knew about autism back then, like they know today, they would have diagnosed him with Asperger's. He's a genius. He's a computer genius, but he's very quiet. He keeps to himself. He's very quirky. He's just a different, odd person. It took me until I was in my mid-20s to understand that's why he was the way he was. When I was a teenager and a small child, I just found that completely embarrassing. And I didn't understand why he was like that. When I was little, it was before my brother was born, so I was probably 6. We were expecting company. We were expecting family. It was her uncle, my grandfather's brother, and his wife that they were coming to visit. She was a horrible housekeeper. Horrible. So that's why I took over, as soon as I could do things, she was having me do things. So I remember they were coming, and she wanted me to clean the bathroom. And I kept telling her I was sick. And I was sick. I was really, really sick. She basically ignored me. And then once everything was clean and I was able to go lay down or whatever, I don't even remember. But what I do remember is waking up in the middle of the night and going to my great aunt and saying, "I don't feel good." And my great aunt putting her hand on my forehead and saying, "You're burning up." I had a really high fever. The compassion from my great aunt versus what was not there from my mother, that kind of stuck with me. My childhood has affected my adult life. I've been in therapy a lot. I've been on and off antidepressive drugs my whole adult life. The first time I went to therapy as an adult, it was because I had really bad postpartum depression. My first son was born when I was 19, and that's what drew me to therapy. But also, going to therapy, it uncovered a lot of things, which I didn't realize that I was bulimic, and I was bulimic. That was another thing. My mom would always have us go on diets together. Always. Like starting at 10 years old, I would be on a diet. That was always like the focus for her. She was always overweight. Looking back as an adult at my pictures, there was nothing wrong with me. Absolutely nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. There's no reason for that. So the first time I went to therapy, that corrected that. My first therapist as an adult was very, very good. He made me see that I wasn't in a healthy marriage. I said, well, how can I be 22 years old and divorced? And he said, why do you care what the world thinks? And that stuck with me too. Why would I care? When I graduated high school, there was no support at all. Even though I was only 17 when I graduated high school. There was no, let's help you apply to colleges, let's help you blah, blah, blah. There was none of that. It was like I had to figure out what I wanted to do and just go for it. So I decided to join the Army. And that's how I met my first husband, was in the Army. I think it took me being out of the home and then coming back to realize that she really did have a problem. And when I say a problem, she could pour herself like a tumbler full of Jägermeister and just drink it. That's definitely a problem. She had this best friend, his name was Patrick. I called Patrick and I said, I think Mom has a problem. And instead of being on my side and trying to be objective, he immediately went to her and said, this is what your daughter is saying about you. And she got so mad at me. She said that I don't have a problem, and she got really mad at me for doing that. And that's when I knew that she was in complete denial, because who drinks that much in a setting? How could anyone drink that much and be okay? You have to be an alcoholic. And I mean, the other stuff too. I mean, the sleeping around, the bed in the car, and passing out in weird locations. She took me to a Christian school. But when I was homeschooled, they give you workbooks or whatever. And she would have me try and complete my work as fast as possible so I could be her friend and watch her soap operas with her. That is not okay. That is not appropriate television for a young child. Just the sexual references alone. That's not appropriate at all. The good memories I have are of my dog. My aunt, who I was named after, she would come visit, and it was kind of a reprisal when she would come visit. I think it seemed like things would get a lot better when my aunt would come, when Aunt Anita would come, because that was my mom's older sister. I don't know if she was showing off for her or what, but this just hit me. My aunt was a social worker. That's probably why it got better. Oh my God, I just realized that. That's probably why it got better when she visited, because my mom didn't want her to see those things. That makes sense. Yeah, but that was her job. She would get kids out of bad situations and, unfortunately put them in foster homes if that's what was required, but that's what she did. I don't think my aunt had any clue. I really don't. And she passed away right after I turned 16. So anything I would have realized, it would have been too late. And the whole taking me to bars and things, that happened after she was passed away. It was just the locking in the basement and the, inappropriate behavior, letting me watch television shows and all of that, leaving me alone for long periods of time. I vividly remember us being in that cabin and me being out and my mom being locked in her room and me just being out in the house. And I don't know what she was doing in there, maybe sleeping, I don't know. My brother was not treated the same. Absolutely not. My birthday parties were small at the house. homemade cakes. My brother got birthday parties at McDonald's and Pizza Hut, store-bought cakes, and lots of friends and lots of presents. My brother was spoiled. He had no idea what was going on the whole time, and I didn't tell him until he was an adult. I wanted to make sure he could handle it. I completely went the other direction. I don't go to church. Any part of our faith that we grew up with, I've kind of put to the side. My brother, on the other hand, is a preacher in that same faith. I left the house when I was 18, so he would have been 11 when I left. All he saw was sister who, disowned the faith and was sinful because I didn't go to church. And I had gotten divorced. That's a big no-no in the faith. So there was a long time that he didn't talk to me. But our mom passed away a couple years ago. And when she passed away, it's like everything changed. And now we're very close. When I was 25, 26, she got into an accident. She was almost killed. When that accident happened, it brought her back to the faith, but almost in a amnesic way, where she kind of forgot everything that had happened. If I tried to bring up anything about what had happened, she would either not want to listen to it or change the subject or pretend it didn't happen. My parents were, my dad not so much, my mom, the corporal punishment. If I am dating a man, sometimes they like to playfully, spank you on the bottom. And I said, no, you cannot do that. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. My mom would hit me. My mom would administer the corporal punishment in the form of spanking with belts, spanking with wooden spoons, and spanking with shoes for anything. If I lied, if I didn't fold the clothes the way she liked, if I didn't clean the bathroom the way she liked, if I didn't clean the baseboard. Oh, that was a big one, cleaning the baseboards. I don't understand what was up with the baseboards, but she always wanted the baseboards cleaned, and if I didn't do it right. And she was a sit there till it's gone mom. That means that, and she was a horrible cook. Horrible. Awful cook. And she would make me sit at the table until my plate was empty. She would make me sit there. And even if it was cold, even if they were done, my mom and my dad were done, I would have to sit at the table until my plate was clean. Which, here's a fun little story for you. When I was little, maybe 4 or 5 when this happened. So we were in the log cabin in the woods. There was a dining room, and then the stairs separated the dining room from the living room, so they couldn't see me if they would go watch TV and I was left at the table. And they had these bar stools, at the kitchen counter, separating the kitchen from the dining room. So the bar stools were made out of recycled beer barrels. So they were about this, and they had padding on the top, but they still had that hole. I would put food in there. There was about this much food in each barrel by the time that she discovered what I was doing. So I don't even know how much food that would be, because those barrels are huge, and to get 2 inches worth at each one, that must have been a lot. But you can imagine how, when I say I was little, it's because of that. I would try not to eat because her cooking was so abysmal. It wasn't good. That has definitely led to something in my life when I started being a mother. I vowed to never let my children, if they didn't want it, they had to taste it. You have to taste it. That was my rule. You just have to taste it. That's it. But I would never make them sit there and eat something they didn't want to eat. I just wanted them to try it. I did have friends that I would go spend the night. There was one friend in particular, her name was Kristen. I would go to her house and spend the night, and it was very different. It was very different. The relaxedness of that house was very different, and it was very comforting. When Kristen's mother passed away, I was in the Army, and they actually let me, they shouldn't have, They shouldn't have let me out on leave, but they did for Kristen's mother's funeral because I was so close with her. She was, she was the one who taught me how to drive. So yeah, my mom didn't do that at all. That was Kristen's mom. I don't remember talking to Kristen about it. I remember her commenting that it was very weird at my house when she would come visit. And of course it would be the same situation. Like when my Aunt Anita would come, my mom would be on her best behavior and it would be fine, but it would still be something where Kristen would comment that it was weird. And of course, I just thought it was because we were Christian and her family wasn't. But looking back, I know that's not the case at all. That wasn't the case. I was always there for her, and she really wasn't there for me. I was always her protector. When she first got into the accident, she got a settlement because it wasn't her fault. The traffic accident wasn't her fault. And people would come out of the woodwork, from her past. The, sleazy bar people would come around and they would try to take advantage of her. And I'd always have to go chase them off. I think that I have forgiven my mother. I don't think I can ever come to terms with why she did that. Especially looking back, being a parent myself. I will never understand. Things will never get that bad for me to be like that with my children. If I could go back in time, I would tell my Aunt Anita. That's what I would do. I would tell her. She would probably take me. She would have taken me. My advice to people who are still battling with the things that happened to them as a child, if they had an abusive or alcoholic parent, I think my advice would be to seek help. And that's so easy to say, go see a therapist or whatever. But that might not be the answer for you. That might not be. I think I would say find someone that you trust and just tell the story and tell it again and again and again until you can figure out what you need, because eventually it's gonna come out what you need to move forward or to overcome. And then you'll know, because it's not gonna be the same for everyone. It's not gonna be the same for everyone.